Hello and welcome to the Unconscious Bias training course. The lessons ahead will help you gain awareness of the nature of bias and how it can affect the responses of individuals and organisations to a negative degree. Much of these influences will be down to simple human nature, but by becoming aware of subconscious influences, you can learn how to make fair and practical decisions more often. So, let's start by first looking at what bias actually is. Bias is essentially a type of prejudice which is strongly in favour of a particular group, item or ideology. This is usually based on personal interpretations or opinions which may or may not contradict practical evidence and other people's input. As such, it can be considered unfair according to the circumstances and have negative consequences. Some people may even view it as a form of corruption.
Bias can present itself in two forms. It can be conscious or explicit bias, where attitudes and opinions are visible and known, or it can be unconscious or implicit bias, where responses and decisions are driven by inherent beliefs that are generally private. The focus of a bias can centre on practically any characteristic in a person, but the most common ones relate to ethnicity, religion, gender, gender identity, sexual orientation, age, weight, appearance.
Unconscious biases usually take the shape of social stereotypes about certain groups and practices that arise from a person's perception of their surroundings. For instance, a recruiter may disregard some candidates during job interviews because they believe they may be too old or belong to a gender that they don't associate with the role. This could compromise the recruitment process due to just one person's opinion.
This brings us to the principle of heuristics. A heuristic, or heuristic technique, is the approach someone will take to problem solving or decision making when time is of the essence. Rather than taking time to research something or analyse the most practical option for long-term effects, we are often forced into positions where we have to rely on mental shortcuts or gut reactions to help make sense of the world. Imagine being on a game show and having only seconds to answer a tricky question.
Whilst a heuristic technique is useful in getting through the next few minutes or days of our lives, it can lead to long-term regrets and an eventual outcome that is not for the best. Imagine a hiker coming to a fork in a forest trail without knowing which way to go. They can't stand there forever trying to make a choice. The decision that is made could be based on any number of factors, but it could still lead them to a dead end or take them to their desired location.
There are three heuristic strategies that the human mind tends to veer towards when making decisions or analysing problems. They are categorised as being attribute substitution. People translate difficult or complex situations into something much simpler, which helps them reach a conclusion. Effort reduction. People take an easy option and make an obvious choice rather than truly analyse a situation and any long-term effects. Fast and frugal. People make quick and simple choices, usually made possible by sorting aspects of complex decisions into smaller chunks and dealing with each one in its simplest form.
The main problem with heuristics is that they can be significantly influenced by circumstances and a person's unconscious bias. Decisions made in this fashion can be considered inaccurate and misjudged. If people use mental shortcuts to classify situations and the credentials of others, they can easily overlook relevant information and rely on stereotypes that may be false.
In turn, this leads us to consider the two systems of thinking that psychologists have referred to in recent years, namely System 1 and System 2. This is just a useful way to explain the two distinct ways in which we think about issues, usually dilemmas or problems. System 1 is the faster mode of thought, being automatic, intuitive and emotional. System 2 is the slower mode of thought, requiring more mental effort and deliberation.
When we use System 1 thinking, it's an immediate process that is almost instinctual. It feels like decisions and associated actions are performed automatically, with the impression that very little mental effort has been expended. People can liken it to snap judgments or similar terms for a rapid and intuitive choice being made.
Typical System 1 thinking is generally associated with everyday activities. It is natural behaviour during normal routines such as driving a vehicle, operating machinery, and solving puzzles. It can be seen in such processes as deciding one object is further away from another, determining the source of a sound, answering timed quiz questions, reacting impulsively to an offensive image, reading text on road signs and billboards, driving a vehicle on an empty road, controlling a character's movements in a video game.
Compared with the System 1 examples, System 2 thinking is more logistically based and considered. The words analytical, deliberate and rational are common words used in association with this approach. When a person uses System 2 thinking, they will be referencing current situations with past experiences and putting considerable effort into mental calculations before reaching a conclusion.
Whilst System 2 thinking can also be used in everyday scenarios, they tend to be more closely associated with reasoning and more mental effort being put into the process. This could include such activities as looking for a specific person in a crowd, trying to identify what type of animal is making a noise, solving complex crosswords or mathematical equations, keeping to a steady speed in a car or on foot, parking a vehicle in a small space, determining what action to take in a sensitive situation, checking whether it's safe to cross a busy road, choosing the most appropriate model when purchasing a high-value utensil.
In terms of unconscious bias, this mostly results from System 1 thinking. This means that a person may not even be aware of any significant prejudices influencing their decision making, even though it is happening on a hidden and instantaneous level. In some cases, a quick decision might even seem to contradict someone's personal values or strong beliefs.
It is important to realise that unconscious bias is part of human nature. Certain scenarios can trigger submerged beliefs and attitudes that are submerged. We have all acted in a certain way during an intense moment, which seems entirely out of character when we reflect on it later. It's an undeniable fact that everybody has biases and prejudices to some extent, and we need to master them. If that seems hard to fathom, think of these behaviourisms that are logistically flawed. People being afraid of spiders or mice. Men opening doors for women but not other males. Checking doors are locked more than once. Carrying an umbrella when the forecast is sunny. Avoiding walking under ladders.
That brings us to the end of this first lesson, where we have covered the principles of unconscious bias and the types of thinking that can lead to it. There's a lot more to learn, so stay with us for the rest of the course. In the next lesson, we'll dive deeply into the origins and causes of unconscious bias. See you soon.